Welcome to the future.
My name is Gerald Cupchik. I'm professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, Scarborough since 1974, and I just can't seem to graduate. Vision, clarity, and imagination together. We're dealing with issues of retirement. We're dealing with people early in their lives planning a career. So let's begin with the crisis. Where are we now? How do we deal with ourselves in the age of technology? Now, German sociologist Hartmut Rosa is very concerned about this. And he talks about the issue of technological acceleration and social acceleration. Cooperate. With the two of them, we're always one step behind. We're never quite catching up. Where will we be in our lives? How will we plan ahead? As a result of always trying to catch up and always being a step behind, he feels that in the 20th century life and 21st century life, we suffer a kind of alienation. And his solution is resonance. His solution is feeling each other's presence and feeling our own. Yuval Harari's very public and precious collection of papers and books, specifically concerning with how experiences contribute to the exchange of information. He wants us to address being part of a bigger system, bigger than ourselves. And he equates human experience with data patterns. And here we have the issue of ourselves and the outside world, where the system can become the source of meaning for us, and that's the heart of my talk. Balancing ourselves against the world of information. Now the humanists, and I'll talk about them, say, listen to your feelings, be aware of your feelings, be aware of who you are. But the dataists listen to the algorithms. They know us better than we know ourselves, and that's our problem, because we're always giving out the information. As a consequence, in the world where information is dominant, human experiences are not intrinsically valuable, and we sort of recede into the background of life. Now, what do we want? What's the price we pay? How does it affect our lives? The boundary between the self and big data becomes more porous. I'm concerned about the outline of our being. Are we aware of the issue of public and private? Are we aware of our presence? Are we aware of what we give away? Because the tracks we leave behind can come back to haunt us. We've all sent messages that we can't retrieve. We've all had to apologize. But when it goes to the large database, the problem is the self can become too diffuse because we're spreading ourselves too thin. We're giving out so much information about our life. The self then can potentially be more manipulated because that database knows too much about us and can begin to control us. Now, let me give a bit of a change of pace. Our minds have changed over 40,000 years. Let's talk about a bit of prehistory. We've always left marks. See? We've always had to survive going back 40,000 years because our instrumental mind has had to solve problems. We've had to adjust. We've had to deal with our environments. We've used tools to survive. From the Sinai Desert, 200,000 years old. When you hold it, you feel your cousins in advance coming out of Mother Africa. You feel the presence of the person with the little notches who used this perhaps to clean a screen. But we have the other side of ourselves. The instrumental side has the expressive side. And what does the expressive side do? It has created paintings on the walls of the Chauvet caves 40,000 years ago. Or imagine the artist sitting alone in the dim light of the flickering oil lamp that had just been created in that era, seeing the man in the moon, but on the walls of the cave as if a movie, and taking out the skin and preserving what they have in their mind. They put it out on the wall to share as a kind of record of culture. Now, I want to do a comparison between the analog mind of old and the digital mind of new. You see, we feel our actions When you do art, when you do music, as we just heard, we feel our presence, we hear ourselves, we sense ourselves. It's holistic, it's organic. Our body is moving. See? We are part of ourselves. And as a consequence, as we grow toward retirement from the early ages of uncertainty into childhood, layers of experience collect. And these aren't just layers of experience, they're layers of meaning that we must address and we try to understand. What's changed over 40,000 years? What's the difference? Well, we've had the cognitive revolution. And what is this cognitive revolution? The old brain of taste and touch and smell gives way to this new logical brain, this problem-solving brain. The analog mind turned into this digital mind. And that's the world we're living in today. Now, let me tell you about this digital mind. You see, the digital mind is not constrained by personal history. You just have your keyboard. You can reach out in any direction without respect for hierarchy. Your teachers, your parents, religious authorities don't necessarily follow you. You can go and you can search. You can seek meaning. But the problem is, in our world of acceleration, social uncertainty, they can become more concerned with outcome than meaning and process because they can measure us, all of us. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of historical run. Psychology professor, that's my job. The German Romantics, early 1800s, Wolfgang Goethe, founder of morphology and biology, and understood how plants grow. They also understood how we grow, because they were concerned in this early existential era in Western Europe, a first world society. They were concerned about how we are aware of ourselves because we're in the post-feudal period. We're in the early stages of the Industrial Revolution. So we have an intuition of becoming, who am I, where am I going? We all struggle with this, I struggle with this. So they assumed that uncertainty and tension are essential in the struggle toward a unified self. And so it's important for us to also resonate to the experiences that we have and others in meaningful situations. Now we move forward into the later 1800s. And the poet Baudelaire talks about the age of discontinuity because this acceleration of society is happening. He favored this spectacle of modern life in Paris with all the new machines and all the fascinations of modern technology. But you see what happens, we have a cult of images because we can preserve it. He romanticized this fragmentation of modern society. He said to the painters, capture the fleeting moment, preserve the fleeting moment, and that's what the Impressionist painters did. Now, Thorsten Veblen, an American sociologist, has talked about conspicuous consumption because in this modern world, you can show yourself off, the achievements that you have. And you can show conspicuous leisure. This is my leisurely life, and we can sense how this can affect us now. Cooley, the sociologist, put an important card on the table. He says, we have a looking glass self because we try to imagine how we're seen by others. Because that way that they see us shapes our identity. But the individual and society are inseparable. I'm moving toward the digital era. In 1935, and who could imagine that television existed then? Rudolf Arnheim, the important psychologist of art, talked about cultural transportation. And he said, with television, the wide world is entering our room, is entering our life. But you see, the individual can become a lonesome consumer of spectacles because you have this screen that seems so real, that is so salient, that is so powerful. And there's a problem. Because illusion, that perceiving is equal to understanding. Just because it looks real on the screen, it must be true. Do we not suffer that today? After World War II, Adorno was talking about the cultural industry, where mechanical reproduction enables mass distribution and consumption. This outside world can feed us information and get us to want to buy things. Hidden messages can begin to control us. make us more conforming. And the problem arises again and again. We become less critical about our world. And in this incredible, remember, there's no internet now. Everything we're concerned about at the outset of my talk, they don't even imagine it. We didn't imagine it in the 60s. Du Bois says, in the spectacle of the society, commodities complete the colonization of social life. You should have this, you should own this, can take us over. Being turns into having, and having turns into merely appearing. So what happens? How do we achieve this authentic life? It gets replaced with its representation. People need to be self-conscious of their situations as an antidote to this problem where we present ourselves as a spectacle. We show this side of our life or that side of our life. In The Lonely Crowd, American sociologist David Reisman talks about the transition in the 50s and 60s where the bureaucratic society takes over from the entrepreneurial. And we need people to fit in. We need them to be the grease of the modern institution. So what happens? We got to fit in. So we identify with people. Okay? We believe in what they consume. We want to be loved rather than esteemed. Autonomy and self-knowledge in that circumstance are compromised. With each of these technological advances, we face a crisis. Because we can be consumed with illusions. We can be consumed with the need to display our life. We can be consumed with products. Are we being critical? Are we being conscious of our worlds? And Marshall McLuhan, the distinguished professor of literature at the University of Toronto, a very dear man with no ego. I have friends who made pilgrimages to meet him. He talked about media, and remember, there's no internet, and he's writing in the 60s, he's writing in the 70s. New media have important personal and social consequences. The message in this medium is the change of scale or pace or pattern that a new medium brings us, and we can sense the arrival of the internet. And that's what happens. He uses the word electricity. Electricity makes everything instant. Time and space collapse. And our professor would never put this in a speech. In the 1960s or 70s or 80s, quoting Playboy magazine. But what did he say in an interview? The central purpose of all my work is to convey this message, that by understanding media as they extend us, we gain a measure of control over them. So my little tool that someone 100,000 years ago held in their hand is not unlike the button we push to give access to television or the mouse that we play with to give us access to the internet. And in all those cases, we must be aware to have control. So one can say, from the medium is the message, one can say the medium becomes the matrix. Like the movie that we were all fascinated with. Because Big Brother from 1984 by Orwell has arrived. We face the crisis that I spoke of at the outset. The matrix is a repository of all we have said or written, of things we know we do, of things we have done inadvertently. We all know we've pressed on an ad somewhere, and that little object keeps coming back again and again when we go to different sites. Algorithms track our conscious and unconscious actions. We may not be aware, and that's part of the purpose of my talk, raising our consciousness, making us aware of our worlds, making us aware of institutions, cultural media that can manipulate us. Now, what are we looking for in social media? What are we looking for? We're looking for connection. We're reaching out to find meaningful new relations. That's logical. And we may be looking for vicarious fulfillment, because when I go to Facebook and I see your life, I live through your life. And that can become problematic. I may be searching for validation. I may be searching for approval, as Reisman has spoken of with the other-directed individual. I want to be accepted. What I do has to be okay. But on the other hand, We may be creating illusions. We may be searching for compensation. We may be presenting ourselves in ways that are our fantasies that we wish we were. Just like conspicuous consumption, we have conspicuous display. Okay, now what do? How do we save the self? How does the cognitive digital mind that reaches out in this instrumental, structured, problem-solving way reconnect with the embodied analogical mind? How do we retrieve our primitive self? And that's part of my point. We want the Vision 2020, but the Vision 2020 goes back in time for the layered self, the essential self, all of our childhood experiences, all of the experiences of our people, whatever society we come from. How do we avoid becoming dopamine addicts? Because they've shown that when we get that little jolt of a message on email, in whatever social medium you favor, we get a jolt of dopamine, we get a reward, and we want more of it. Cigarettes are not the only addiction. Now, we need to take ownership of our technological lives. Okay? We want to be aware of the facts and the situations of our private lives. We need to find ourselves. We need to address the skin of our life and address the porousness where we give so much away without necessarily knowing. The social and technological worlds surrounding us, we need to be understanding of these institutions. How do they work? Are they trying to manipulate us? What's going on in the midst of our daily life that is accelerating so rapidly and turning? We need to unify ourselves in the face of big data. Thinking of Rosa, where I started my story, we need to slow down. We need to feel the moments of our life, and we need to feel the presence of others, not remotely on screens, but presence with us in face-to-face interaction so that taste and touch and smell regain importance. We need to explore the layers of our personal history. What's your life about? How did you construct your identity? How did you survive? Where did you get your resilience? And not just that, the resilience of your family, the resilience of your people. We need to explore these situations around us, to take the risk, to be out there in the world, to find out what the world is like with first-hand knowledge, not vicariously through others. And we need to value our experiences, because when we slow down, we become mindful of the moment. We can feel the moment. We can reflect on the moment. And not just that, on the issue of retirement, for whatever age we are. We need to imagine ourselves 10 years in the future. How will I get there? How will I take my layers of experience and arrive at that state? Now you see, a fine line separates us from the machine world. But we have to remember, even though machines can give us the music we want and they know what we want, they can take care of what we want and what we need, but they are not organic. They have no blood or feelings. They have no emotional history. They can correct themselves, but they don't feel the pain of those early mistakes from which they can learn. They just store information. See? And remember, they can control us, but they're not conscious. So in the end, my story is a story of recovering ourselves, recovering our personal histories, recovering the histories of our people, taking the risks, learning from the risks, and being aware of ourselves in the end. Thank you very much for listening, and to our people.